Welcome, everyone, to Brought to the Table, a podcast where we dedicate it to having a guest on the show who brings a topic of discussion to the table. I am your host, Luke Jones, and I am here with a very special guest here that we already alluded to in our very first episode. The one, the only, when he's not recording his rap albums or trying to do the sequel to Aladdin live action remake, we have Will Smith here.
It's me, Will Smith.
Will Smith, how you doing?
The one and only. I'm doing great.
You're doing great. How's the Aladdin sequel coming along?
Oh, filming is complicated, so I'm having to do it on my iPhone 4S and send it over to be fixed in CG. Yeah. I'm getting really excited.
That's a way to record a movie.
Yeah,
I didn't realize people were still using 4S's.
You
baby.
You gotta do. Those royalties from Fresh Prince are running out a little bit, so
They're running out. All that 90s money is finally starting to catch up with you, huh?
Yep.
All those yachts you're buying.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
You gotta do what you gotta do. But welcome, Will Smith. Thank you for joining us. And like we always are with these podcasts now, we are having the guests bring a topic of discussion to the table. Now, Will Smith had brought a very interesting topic to the table, and I will kind of let him kick us off with the topic. So, Will, go ahead and take us away.
So, we're going to talk about game tutorials and how there's very good ones and there's a lot of very bad ones. Because boy, oh boy, do those bad tutorials irk me.
I agree 100%, especially when they don't teach you everything.
Oh no.
The teacher in me just starts to cry a little bit on the inside when I'm like, ugh.
Wait a minute, that's not how you teach.
Like, that's not how that works. Now, I guess one thing to start this off a little bit is like, the old games, way back in the day, the reason why they didn't have tutorials is because obviously memory space and stuff. So like the instruction booklets kind of were taking care of the tutorial stuff for you. So, but nowadays, people don't like to kill trees. So tutorials actually have to be put into the game so people know what the heck is going on. So, Will, tell me some games that you really like the tutorial systems and why.
There are very good tutorial systems in Mario games.
You're
games have
you're not wrong.
Incredible tutorial system because you learn everything and they don't force it anything. Mega Man, great tutorial system. What's something recent with a good tutorial system? Most of the recent stuff, nothing super great, but nothing terrible either. They recent games tend to go with the here's a cutscene and here's the button to punch, and now the cutscene pauses until you punch.
Are you talking about Avengers?
Yes.
Oh my god.
Yes.
I was wondering if you were.
Yeah, and I think Spider-Man did that too. A lot of games do that now. They're like, okay, use R2 to swing, and then he just kind of floats there in the air until you start swinging.
So I want to kind of jump back into the Mario tutorial thing. So like, what makes the Mario like? Because everyone knows who the Italian plumber is.
Yeah.
And he's celebrating his 35th anniversary this year, and he's about to have 3 horrible ports of his games come out tomorrow on the day that we're recording this. But like, what makes the Mario tutorials good? Because I think there's different types of tutorial mechanisms within games on how they approach tutorials. And obviously you're already mentioning like the whole thing of like, oh, you click the button and the button's going to do this thing. But there are definitely games out there that don't even approach it like that, but they definitely still have tutorial systems. So talk to me a little bit about how you feel Mario is a good like tutorial system in the games.
Okay, so the way Mario does tutorials is just level design. everything is just encapsulated in the level. It doesn't, at the beginning of the game, it doesn't go, Mario, press XX to jump. It just says, okay, now run. There's no dialogue that sits you there for 15 minutes explaining, okay, here's the 2 buttons you need. It just is Mario. And then whenever a new mechanic shows up, fire, flower, what have you, the wing cap from 64, it gives you, right around when you first get it, it gives you the simple explanation of the item. It's like, okay, there's a wing cap, you can fly. And then it gives you open level to fly around in. Then later on, you get the wing cap. It introduces enemies into it, makes it a little more complicated, and then it gets hard with the item. It's like a 3-4 step process. It explains everything through gameplay
I like when I get to play my video
instead
games
of dialogue. Yay!
Yeah, that's like one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to games is that they're like I understand the tutorial, like trying to speak all the dialogue because you can read it out, you can see what it's trying to do. But honestly, the best way to practice to make sure you understand a mechanic is to play the game. And I know exactly what you're talking about for Mario 64 because even if you're playing like the original 64 version, like flying controls and the camera aren't necessarily the most intuitive thing on the Nintendo 64. So having like literally there is a level designed around the fact that all right, the wing cap is here. Now put the wing cap on and start flying away. And also too with that stage, if I recall, there actually is like a star attached to it. So like you are still like accomplishing something, not just going through the tutorial.
Yeah, that wing cap level is like a really good example of it because you get the wing cap and that first star is just like at the top of whatever platforms. So you're just flying across the level to get to the star. Then you can go back and it's like, okay, now do that. Here's from red coins. So it introduces a little bit more complicated. Then it's, here's red coins, but also moving platforms and enemies now to get to a star. So it just increases difficulty. It increases your skill. Instead of going, uh-oh, Mario, there's a turtle now. Watch out. Because you can look and see that there's a turtle there.
Turtle. What is it? I really generally like that type of tutorial design because it really just forces the players to really just interact with the game. I also think too one of the things that some games that do really well is that like when they introduce mechanics, they introduce it level by like level. Because I know, so I'm a huge fan of Sly 2, Band of Thieves, and in that game, each world that you go to introduces essentially like a new concept that then gets built into the next world. So you're not just like being shoved all this stuff in front of you at once. You basically you learn the mechanic, and then literally like that entire world when you're navigating it is like built around that mechanic on top of the mechanics that you learned for previous worlds. So like the first one's like you learn how to climb and then rail walk and then spiral jump and then rail slide and then cane swing, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's also a great one because and granted, that one's a little more dialogue heavy, I'll admit, but rather than trying to push all this stuff, like there is one bit where they're like, all right, here's this mechanic. Do the mechanic thing now. That's it. They don't try to reference it again, all that stuff. I think that is fantastic ways of going about doing tutorials.
Oh, yeah.
So I got to ask you when it comes to tutorials, and this can be a good or a bad thing. So we can start off that branch a little bit. But do you like it when games kind of break you out of the fact that you're in a video game? So like example is like when the game literally says press the X button, and there's literally a character that says the X button. Because Sly does that all the time, and I love it.
I don't have any problem with it if it's like meant as a joke.
But when
when you're sitting in some serious circumstance, and they're like, okay, we gotta go save the world now. Also, press square to dodge. It's like, don't try to slip it in there. Like Sly can do it because he's goofy. That's fine, but don't you dare try to slip that in there and make me not notice. Like that's goofy.
Have you had that type of experience before where it's done that?
Uh-huh.
What game? I'm curious.
Let me think what it was. My brain says Kingdom Hearts 3. I don't think it was Kingdom Hearts 3. I think
It's definitely not Kingdom Hearts 3. It can't be.
I don't think just
that game is
playing it
already
around
weird.
the same time.
How's it episode 2? We've already mentioned Kingdom
no
Hearts
way.
twice
It is
within this podcast.
Dude, we needed Kingdom Hearts.
I have the two Kingdom Hearts nerds literally start off the podcast, so we already have Kingdom Hearts just ingrained into the show.
I love it.
Oh my god.
Well, anyway, I can't remember, but no, when it's just like, okay, oh wow, I can do this with my cane. Okay, now press B or whatever. Fine. But when they're like, okay, now go save the world and don't forget to press X to. It's like, okay, thanks, cool.
I actually, it's
maybe
funny.
It was Final Fantasy 14 or 15.
Oh yeah.
Maybe it was Final Fantasy 15.
Oh boy. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think so. Sly Cooper's like the one that comes to my brain initially, but like part of the charm of the game is the fact that they're very self-aware. So like that makes sense, and they don't try to like. They only do it when they're teaching
part
you
of the
new
game,
mechanics.
Absolutely. Don't try to slip it into
Yeah.
That's fine.
But I remember specifically recently that there was a few different games that kind of brought you out of it. I actually remember when I was playing the Spiral Reignited trilogy, like when you're talking with different NPCs, all of a sudden they're like, press the action button to do this. And I'm like, so you're having a serious conversation with me about this quest I'm about to go on, and then you're telling me to press the action button. And then I was playing Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, of all games, a few months ago. And that game is supposed to be very much like we were trying to retell the story of Dragon Ball Z. And there's actually like bits of dialogue when you're playing the game where they're like, press the key blast button to do this. And I'm like, what?
Don't do that, no.
I'm like
just have them say, remember to key blast. You don't gotta say button in there.
Yeah.
Maybe. Like it's already weird, but
yeah. It's like, I get it, but at the same time, it's like you can only just push that type of information on somebody too much until they're taken out of the experience. Because I think one thing that definitely goes into this conversation is the fact that the tutorial has to be built into the experience of the game itself.
Oh, for sure. Like one game that has really good tutorials that was made recently that I just thought of. Shovel Knight.
Oh, there we go. We can bring that game into the conversation.
Oh, Shovel Knight. What wonderful tutorials you have.
Oh, it does. It's got a really good way of approaching everything.
Yeah, because it puts it in the gameplay. It puts it in the level design. It doesn't say, okay, stop everything you're doing. Okay, if you press down, you can shovel jump or whatever. Like, stop. Let me figure it out. I'll figure it out. I'm a big kid. I don't need, character number 4 to say, hey, you can dodge attacks. I got that.
Press the down on the D-pad to do a shovel dive or whatever the heck it's called, the pogo stick.
The pogo stick one.
Yeah, the pogo stick move. Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah.
No, yeah, Shovel Knight's got great tutorials because I absolutely agree. I think Shovel Knight's level design really shows the tutorial side of things because each level's kind of got like its own gimmick. And like even in the levels themselves, like what they do is that they show the gimmick off and then they slowly start pushing the gimmick a little bit more throughout the level.
That's exactly how to do a tutorial. One game that does tries to do those kinds of tutorials but does it terribly. Zelda.
Oh yes.
I'm sorry, Zelda, but gosh, you.
I've always like they just don't know how to scale. That's the problem with those games.
It's like use a bomb. Here's how bombs work. Do you know how to use a bomb?
I'm like,
every
really?
single time.
Oh, I think that's what always takes me out of those games. Is like when you
Like
get
before the end
when you get
boss, and they're
introduced
like,
to those
okay, press
mechanics, it's
B
just kind
to
of like,
put a bomb down.
yeah, it's like I just feel so taken out of the experience because like these Zelda
I don't
games are
need
like,
a fourth menu to tell me how bombs work just because I
oh my
rebooted the
god,
game.
I I I because it's like every time that I try to play those games, it's just I get taken out of the experience so hard when it's like telling me to do this stuff, and like there's supposed to be these grand open adventures, and I'm just like, ugh. Like you're just trying to sit here and spoon feed me this information when I'm trying to like I'm going on a quest to defeat Ganondorf. Why am I spending 10 minutes trying to figure out how the hell to throw a bomb? You know, like it's like
Can you
why?
use Skyward Sword?
Oh, let's not talk about that game. That game doesn't exist. Although apparently it might be getting a Switch port next year. I don't know.
We'll see.
We'll see. Let's see if people
We'll
actually
see.
want that.
I don't need that one.
But speaking of games with port tutorials, what are some other games that really stick out to you?
Any game that does the stupid picture of the controller with the little lines to the description of what the button does.
Oh, like
Those
they
are
show the
great.
actual controller?
Yeah, I hate those. I
Why?
think because it's too much information, and they usually just like put it on a loading screen, so you're there like, okay, here's 10 seconds, go. And it's like, okay, that's a shoot button, that's a dodge, that what the heck's a I don't even know what that word means. It's like super mega, it's chi blast. It's like, what? This is a shooter game. What
Are
does
you
that
calling us
mean?
Sonic Unleashed?
A little bit. I
Oh,
think Just
okay.
Cause is also a big one
Oh,
that
Just
does
Cause is
that.
another one,
Like, freaking stop! I hate those. Assassin's Creed. They're like, this is the remembrance button, and it's like, what?
Why do you think they do
What
that?
does that
Because I never
mean?
understood that. Because like if you like because at that point like you've already played the game enough that you know what the controls are. Like I don't mind
Yeah.
the loading screens that are like, oh, here's a hint and here's like
Oh
remembering how to
yeah.
do this little
Looking at you,
unique mechanic thing.
Avengers. You can equip gear in the menu. Oh,
I'm
thanks.
like,
I didn't know that loading screen. Thanks for the tip. Dodge attacks to not take damage.
sounds like Will's a little salty.
I really hate those menu screen loading tip things a lot of the times too.
I
Because if
was
you're
recently
gonna have
playing
it, give
Tony
me a good
Hawk,
tip, please.
and I they do that in Tony Hawk, and because like I don't know what any of that stuff means
Mm.
because the thing is the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 remastered tutorial is actually really good, teaching you all the mechanics of the game. But like the thing is, if you aren't like into the skating culture and like understand tricks and stuff, like there is no way for you to understand like what some of the stuff that they're saying on the loading screen means, or even in the game. When I have
Mm.
to go look something up on the internet and the game can't teach me, that is a little bit of a bad sign. Like I can execute
That's not
stuff,
good.
but
Yeah.
I don't know what this stuff means, and there's not really a way for the game to teach you what that means.
Mm-hmm.
It's rough.
Like, yes, I understand it's a skater game for skater fans, but you know, teach me a little bit, please. Don't just say, okay, here's the button to do a jazzy overdrive, and it's like, what?
It does do a great tutorial though for like teaching you
Yeah,
like
that's good.
main mechanics of the game. It's just like it's like I have a very big pet peeve about fighting game tutorials because
Oh yeah.
fighting game tutorials are very big for like learning the character, learning the core mechanics, and like if your game doesn't teach you that stuff, then
And then you have a
it's like
problem.
how are you supposed to actually learn how to play the game, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um and like that's the thing with like Tony Hawk right now is like I remember it's like they were asking you to do a nose grind and I thought I was doing a nose grind and then it's like, "Oh, you actually need to jump on the rail, hold up while hitting the triangle button to do a nose grind." Someone's going to correct me in the comments. But I'm like, I didn't know what that meant. There nothing was telling me what that was, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um yeah. Make your tutorials better, people. I'm gonna
And
hunt you down
make
and
them
make
good.
sure I'll
It's so
teach you.
easy to make good. Uh, but like Shovel Knight's genius. I love. I because it has the little like you get the item and you have to go to a little separate room to get the item with the chest in it. And it's usually like 2 paths: a path to the chest and then back to the door. But the second path, you have to use the item to get back. So it's smart.
It
Puts it in the
forces you to learn.
gameplay. It makes you learn. What's really important is put it in the gameplay. Don't change the game in order to teach you how to play the game, because then you're defeating the purpose.
I feel like there's some salt still coming through here. There's some
If you're
salty
changing
experiences
the
that
way
Will
the
has.
game works. There's I get very angry at bad tutorials because there's so many games that do it right. You should just be able to like not screw it up.
Well,
Um,
I think it is tough because
like
when you're
it's
building-
definitely tough,
yeah.
but it's better than never, ever, ever should I ever see one of those stupid controller menus that hasn't been.
We're jumping into the new console generation, so you're going to see one or two of them at some point.
I know I'm going to see them, and they're the bane of my existence. They're never helpful.
And they're going to sit there and mock you every time that the loading screen pops up, which they shouldn't exist to begin with because we shouldn't have loading screens apparently.
No,
but hey,
yeah. See, I'm looking at you, Avengers.
When it comes to the tutorials, like I think so coming from the education side, like when you're trying to build out something to coax people into learning something and like learning the building blocks to get to the end result, like it does take some time. And I think, like when you're teaching a class, it's a lot easier because like your assignments, you can build the assignments to like stepping stone off of each other. Like you're learning this skill and then next week you're going to learn this skill, but the skill you learned last week kind of applies to what you're learning the new week. And I feel like in a video game, like what you're talking about with like Shovel Knight and Mario, and even like what you mentioned with Mega Man, I think why those games really excel is like what you said is the gameplay. And really what it is, it's like you're building blocks off of what you're learning. I think what's made it more difficult over the years with the tutorial side of things is kind of what I talked about at the beginning of the show, is because tutorials never existed in video games before, really, is because games were limited to so much memory space. So that's why you had the big chunky instruction booklets, which I dearly miss.
I also miss the book.
Shout outs to the Shovel Knight instruction book, though, if you bought the physical version.
I love you.
It's so good.
Knight. Everything you do is right.
They care. But even with that being said, though, it's like, not everyone is going to do something like that anymore. And I like, honestly, like I haven't bought a physical game in years, but and when people I talk to who buy physical games, they always tell me like how they're awed by the fact that, because they've been buying video games forever, so like they just expect that there's going to be like an instruction booklet in there, and like we still had the big colorful instruction booklets in the PS2 era. Then the PS3 era, they started really kind of going away, or they were going black and white, and then by the end they were just non-existent, or there's pamphlets. I actually remember when I bought my copy of Slide Thieves in Time, all the instructions were that they were in the inside of the case, like on the back part of the case, telling you the controller. Your favorite thing, Will, had the controller layout. It told you what everything did. It was great.
Look, okay, I don't have a problem with it if it's like there as an optional thing, but when that's your only tutorial and you're forced to look at it every single time, then it's annoying. Cough, cough. Assassin's Creed. But if it's like in the back of the box booklet, that's fine. Okay, because then just go check it out real quick.
That's funny. I lost my train of thought. What I was gonna say though is that I don't know how many games do this anymore, but do you remember in the age, like I think it was basically towards the end of like the PS3 360 era, where like when they were phasing out the instruction booklets, they were doing like digital instruction booklets?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I still have a few of them downloaded.
Yeah. They have a little slip with the QR code and it says "Okay for instruction."
Here's your instructions.
Yeah.
Did you ever find those instruction booklets actually helpful, though?
I never, ever, ever looked at those digital instruction booklets.
No, I never did either. I think I looked at one.
I would flip through a lot just because. You know, it was there.
But in like all honesty, like, did you ever actually take the time to use the instruction booklet and like learn something to help you in the game?
Only once, and it was for the weird Godzilla game on the NES.
Really?
Yeah. That was the only time I ever needed the instruction booklet to actually know what was happening. But that's because that game was a terrible mess. Like, holy moly. There was no way to know anything unless you read that instruction booklet.
I was gonna say, I'm like thinking back because so like most of my PlayStation 1 games and PS2 games that I owned, I still have the instruction booklets for. I
Mm.
don't actually think there is any like I would look at the instruction booklets to like because you know the PS1 ones are like super colorful. Like I love the Crash Bandicoot PS1 instruction booklets because they just got all like the key art for characters and like the boxes and stuff in there. And it's really cool. But like I actually don't think there is any actual games like instruction booklet that I actually use to help myself out. Like
Yeah.
because most of the games I play, not trying to be that guy, but I don't like to play crappy games, except
I
Sonic
agree.
games sometimes.
Oh,
That's a different story. Um, and I don't really I've never really experienced like bad tutorials. I've definitely experienced tutorials that have taken me out of the experience. I actually recently was playing this game called No Straight Roads, and the tutorials in that game really took me out of the experience because they really handhold you through like everything. Like big explanations. They do something that turns the pace off, so like you're not getting that high paced action, and then all of a sudden it's just like you're slowed down to a crawl when you're playing this music oriented action game, and
uh-huh.
and I was just like, I just really wonder what makes folks think that that's how you need to approach a tutorial. Like, I wonder if really they were just like, there's just so much going on in our game that we just need to spoon feed you the mechanics. But even then, it's like,
I guess.
is that even the right way of doing it?
So I have two big irks with some tutorials and how they're done. Number one, mobile game tutorials. Um, they're bad because they're walls of text, and I know it's a mobile game, so it's already kind of low quality. But man, they do that thing where they're like, okay, now go press this button to go to the store and buy a whatever. And I don't want to do that. I want to go build my a new barn or whatever. But it's like, nope, you gotta buy a gotcha ball.
You gotta give
You know
us
what?
money.
Like Roller Coaster Tycoon and like Zoo Tycoon, those kind of games do it too. They're like, okay, here you go. Now you're free to go. And then it's like, wait a minute, here's how you use the bulldozer. Now bulldoze your building. And it's like, but that's my burger stand. I want that. But no, it's like learn the bulldozer.
I remember I recently played City Skylines a bit last year. And I remember when I
Mm-hmm.
was learning that game. A great game, by the way.
It is. It is.
It's a great game, but like I think it's weird because in games like that, like you know, a lot of the games we're referencing right now, they're very like action oriented. They have a story, you know, or some type of like you know world experience thing that you want to be a part of. And I mean, like when you're doing something like a roller coaster tycoon or zoo tycoon or city skylines, like I it's a little different, which I
Yeah.
understand, but I think it goes back to like what you said that really it needs to be taught, you know, through the gameplay. But
Can't
when you're reading
change the
giant
rules.
walls of text to understand what you're supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's even more difficult. And
Yeah.
I feel like the best way to approach that stuff is always like do the video tutorial style of like, oh, on the screen, like actually show off where like your mouse cursor should go. So literally instead of you like reading the text, you actually see where you're supposed to click
Mm-hmm.
and then approach it that way. Because I think honestly the biggest issue with tutorials is honestly the pacing. Like the
Yeah.
way that they bring you out of the gaming experience when you're playing it. And that could be from how it's done in the story. So like if you're just being blocked by giant like tutorials after tutorial after tutorial, um, it could be the fact that like if you're playing a story heavy game, it says like actually press the button in the dialogue. And it's definitely supposed to be like an experience, not like something goofy. I think that's tough, and I think it's tough based off the different games, but it boils down to pacing to me.
Pacing. Well, okay, so that's the other big thing is when you change the mechanics of the game to teach a new mechanic, and then it throws you back into the original mechanics. Don't like that's dumb.
Yes.
That's stupid.
Why you do this?
Like, you can't expect me to learn a thing when you change the rules specifically for like this tutorial cutscene, and also, so yeah, you can no longer die in this because you have to counter. So you're not. Don't change the rules on me. Let me just say, okay, here's how you counter. Now go learn how to do it in the game. For Honor was one that did that a lot. That Ubisoft game. Ubisoft.
A lot of Ubisoft games do that.
They're like, okay, here's a little waiting room where you can check out this new mechanic, but it changes all the other rules of all the other mechanics, and so you can't figure out how countering works with dodging. You can't figure out how to block and attack because you can no longer attack, only block. You don't get to explore your skill set.
Because everything needs to kind of like, especially like I know what you're talking about with like For Honor and stuff. Like all that stuff needs to kind of coexist with each other because in that game it's kind of like a giant game of rock paper scissors. So when you're stripped to one thing, how are you supposed to be able to understand to use everything else at the same time? Because then it's like, oh, you're only supposed to use this mechanic at this particular time, but it's possible that they might switch it up and do this on you, and you need it. And it's like, it's tough. That's why fighting game tutorials are tough.
Fighting game tutorials are very tough.
Yes. I do have to give huge shout outs though to NetherRealm, the guys who make Mortal Kombat. Those guys make great tutorials because they walk you through everything and they actually give you practical examples of situations where you would be using things. And what's nice about it too is that like in a fighting games can be incredibly complex. Incredibly complex. And NetherRealm really took the time to understand that, like, okay, this is going to be for someone who just wants to understand, like, how do I do a special move? How do I chuck my scorpion chain at somebody? But then here's the tutorial for like doing all the more advanced stuff that's like super like competitive game type of things that we've included in the game, or like how you can think differently by using this move. I do think there's also like that level of with those types of games, like even For Honor, where it's like, all right, if I just want to jump in and just hit stuff, like let me hit stuff, you know? But there's also like that level of tutorial where it's like, all right, if you do want to move a little beyond that, here's like this new tutorial that's going to help walk you through these advanced mechanics. And I think that's missing from a lot of these competitive style games, because I absolutely adore Overwatch, but Overwatch does not really have a great tutorial. It teaches you how to shoot, it teaches you how to use your abilities, and that's basically it. It doesn't teach you about any of the different types of like how you should be approaching different situations. Like they do give you a training ground to like learn your character and stuff, but it's also like, how are you supposed to learn the character when you're not put into a practical situation?
It says, okay, here you go. Diva has a blocking mechanic, but then doesn't give you any way to
exactly like
block.
Like, how am I supposed to use these different skills and these particular things, especially when it's like teammates? Like, especially a lot of the support characters. Like, how am I supposed to understand how to use my team mechanics? And like, I know that they have like training dummies that you can like damage and then like show that it heals.
That's not the same.
But yeah, it's not the same. Like, you need the practical experience.
Changing the rules of the game to show you how the game works.
Right.
That doesn't work.
And that's not necessarily the best thing in the world.
No. I will say this is something like I think Ghost of Tsushima did, and Avengers does it. When you have the like skill tree
Oh
menu and
yes,
you're getting new skills, it has the little video preview of how it works. So it's like him throwing the smoke bomb or doing two slash attacks at once. I love that.
the sucker punches. They've been doing that since the original
Yes,
Infamous, and I have to give them
yes,
huge
it's
applause for that
amazing.
because
I love
what I
that.
love about that is that, like, granted, it's not like they're telling you what it's supposed to do, and like, but in the video is not actually letting you interact with that particular ability,
Mhm.
but they literally are showing off what, like, all right, what what it does right now, but once you get that upgrade, what it's going to do. Um, Also, Devil May Cry 5
Mhm.
lets you literally try out the new ability before you even purchase it. So you
Oh,
can
that's
actually
fun. I
execute
like
it beforehand, make sure it's something you want to actually use in your game plan before you actually spend money on it, which I think
That's
is
smart. I like that a lot.
awesome. Because they also
Um,
do the whole showing the video of the thing, but they also give you the
yeah,
chance to try it out. So that way, if it's like, all right, this is something right now I don't practically need, you don't have to get it, which I think is fantastic. I wish more developers would take.
yeah, that's super good. I like that a lot. But what I think that does is it gives you the button obviously, and it says okay you can hit R2 to parry this attack. And it shows you a little preview of how it works, so you can see it and be like, oh, okay, so that's what it does. But then it doesn't force it on you, so now you can go and experiment in actual gameplay how it works. You can go actually use it on an enemy and watch them explode or whatever.
Which is essentially what a lot of these action games are, is making enemies explode,
Yeah,
which I adore.
yeah, it's great.
But well, we talked a lot about the bad stuff.
Yeah.
So, is there any other good things, other good tutorials out there? Because there's a few I definitely want to point out. Um,
Um, I so I want to say Dark Souls real quick because their tutorials are kind of hard to find actually. Uh,
yeah,
but they usually just like leave a little thing on the ground you can interact with that says, okay, here's your light attack button, here's your heavy attack button, and then there's one 3 feet away, says block. But what it does is again in the level design. So first you'll see this little zombie guy in front of you, and he slowly lumbers towards you, and you kill him easy. You walk a little bit further. One comes around the corner, so it's a little bit more of a surprise. So you have to dodge and then kill him, and then it's like, oh, here's one with a shield, and it's like, okay, here's one with a shield, and another one. So it's that good level design of slowly teaching you how things work and getting you used to different situations in which it's helpful. So it's very smart. And then you get up to the boss and he just smashes. So
smash your face in, smashy, smashy.
he demolishes. And then it teaches you to run back 80 times. So it's more tutorial.
Yay, running. Um, Absolute favorite thing. Um, One of the games I definitely want to shout out for the tutorial system is both Last of Us games. And I know not everyone is a fan of Last of Us 2 for a multitude of different reasons, what I will not get into. But the gameplay of both those games does an incredibly good job of introducing new mechanics when they come up. They actually, like, while you're in the story, like, all of a sudden you do get like this new piece of equipment that, like, they'll just say, like, all right, this is what this gun does, or what this tool does, or like how you're supposed to craft ammo or whatever. And they actually do a relatively decent job of like putting you quickly into a situation where you should be using that particular weapon. And the thing is, you don't have to, because I mean, the one of the things about The Last of Us is that it's a lot of choice oriented stuff in gameplay where you have to choose wisely, like what you should be doing in that particular moment. But they usually try to put you in situations for when you get a particular weapon, it's like that's the time you should be using it. Like, you got a rifle, so you should probably be shooting out the dudes from a long range distance. Or they give you a shotgun, and you're like, all right, all of a sudden, 3 dudes are just coming right at you. Guess what? You're just gonna pull out Mr. McShoddy and just blow them to pieces. Or, even when it comes to like some of the in Last of Us 2, when it comes to some of like the swinging mechanics and things like that, like they really do a good job of just trying to walk you through how that stuff is supposed to interact with everything. And I do have to give them a huge shout out for that, because that those games are not easy, even on medium, and like making sure that you introduce the mechanics at a decent rate is very important to me personally. So Last of Us is also a great game. You should at least play the first one, if not the second one. Second one will make you sad and not feel good on the inside. But that's besides the point. That's for another podcast. So what I did want to close the show out on, Will, if you don't mind, is that I know we've been talking a lot about the video game sphere. And I kind of want to transition over to something that I know you and I are kind of a big fan of, is the tabletop side of gaming. And I know it's different, but I think one thing I've noticed recently that
big
yeah,
difference in tutorial.
They are very different. And the thing is that a lot of tabletop games recently, especially one that I know you and I play, have been doing these things where in the game itself, it actually has tools to help walk you through how to play the game rather than just read the rule book. What's your opinions on that, friend?
Anything that, so a rule book can be fine for board games as long as it's a good rule book. But when you introduce something that it says, hey, here is a little example of how it can be used, that does 2 things. That tells you, what exactly a mechanic does, and it gives you an idea on how to branch out on that mechanic. And it lets you have that freedom without forcing it down your throat.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I was going to say, Root. So Root by Leader Games has something built into it where if you buy the core box, at least, it has a little walk you through how learn to play Root kind of guide where it walks you through some turns if you're playing like a 4-player game or something like that. I forget. Yeah. And it's very good, especially because that game is very complex. And also another game I've played has this too. Wingspan also has something where literally there is a pack of cards that are separated from all the main stuff where they're like, if it's your first time playing this game, take these cards, lay them out exactly like this. Still gives you all the freedom, still walks you through everything. And then the nice thing too is that after you're done using those cards, you can still use those cards again in future playthroughs without having to do the tutorial stuff again. They can just be shuffled, which is awesome. I adore that.
Yes.
What are some things you wish more tabletop companies would do for this tutorial stuff?
So I recently bought Isle of Cats.
Ooh.
Fun little game. I'm enjoying it, but I will say, I'm not a fan of the rule book, really.
Yeah.
And there's a couple reasons why. Number one, boy, oh, that's a hefty book.
Oh, really?
That
it's thick.
Like it's a word wall. It's pretty thick for just an instruction booklet, and it comes with 2 or 3 other smaller booklets. It's nuts.
Really?
Yes. And another thing it does is it has a solo rule set, which is great. It has a big rule set, and then it has another rule set for the same like kind of play. So it's got two rule sets, both for 3 or 4 standard number of players. I think one's just for a shorter game, but it doesn't explain that. It doesn't explain
Oh,
that there's a different set of rules. So you have these two booklets. One's a whole lot thicker and one's a whole lot smaller. And they both say almost exactly the same thing with some with some different setup pieces. But it doesn't explain anywhere. So one of them's like the family rule set. That's the quicker version of the game, and it just gives you different setup, and it doesn't say anything about the mechanics. It doesn't say anything. So it just what it looks like at the beginning is it's just like, oh, okay, here's a shortcut for setup, but no, it's an entirely different game mode. And it like last time I tried to play it, that confused me so much.
yeah, that would be very confusing where you have like,
Yeah.
I mean, because I know there's definitely games that have done the whole thing where like, all right, here's like the main, like here's like the normal intermediate mode, but then here's like the advanced mode.
Mm-hmm.
But they make that relatively clear in like the rule set stuff, like especially if you're playing games that are like trading card games or collectible card
Mm-hmm.
games where you're like building decks. Like usually, like the core rule set will tell you like if you're playing with like the starter decks, but then like afterwards they'll introduce like, hey, here's the deck building mechanic. Like here's how the deck building rules work. Oh, if you're getting these booster packs, you might like encounter these keywords. So like these keywords that you didn't see in your starter decks are like this is what they do, so that way you don't
Yeah.
get confused. I've definitely seen games before that have kind of failed at that. But I've also seen games that are complex do that well. One of them recently, actually, Marvel Champions. There are 2 rule books that come in that game, and there is one that clearly is like, all right, this rule book is for learning the core game. The other rule book is for when you're getting into the nitty gritty with everything, like when you're trying to learn all the complexities and all that stuff. So that way they're just not shoving so much information in your face. Because, I mean, like we both play Root. Like Root does the same thing. There is a learn to play guide. And then there's also like, here's the law of Root where it goes into everything, like in the detail and the nitty gritty. So when you get to those times where you're going to be playing games like that, you're set and you're ready to go. You got to make sure you can digest what you're learning, because when you clutter up things too much, I know from me making this mistake as a teacher at some points in my life, when you throw too much at somebody, they just can't absorb it and then they get lost. And then in video games or tabletop games, guess what happens? They don't play the game. And that's not what we want people to do. We want people to play games because games are fantastic. It's how the world has brought us together through the power of games. It's so weird to hear about Isle of Cats because I've heard so many good things about Isle of Cats.
It's a good game, but the rules, you got to read them a couple times, and then you're like, oh, it's a different game mode. Okay, that's why it's so weird.
That is so odd.
Mm-hmm.
That is really weird. Well, rule books are fun. Trust me. Try writing one. They're not easy.
Oh, Star Wars Destiny has a good rule book.
Oh, they got some real good rule books, let me tell you. Are their starter decks suck? Yes. But do the rule books work out really well? Oh, they're very good rule books. I very much enjoy the Star Wars Destiny rule books a lot. They're very good. And the nice thing too about Star Wars Destiny is like once you know the basics, you can go online and get the giant like appendices that's got like everything in it, and it dives into every single mechanic at a core. So you don't have to worry about all the edge case stuff when you're like playing the game initially, which is really nice. So I got to give them a huge credit. That game is very, very approachable. Besides the fact that the starter decks suck, which is a whole other thing in itself. Because it goes back to It actually, it's funny because the starter deck goes back into the thing that you were talking about with the whole like putting you into a scenario where you're playing only working with one mechanic and then taking you out of it. Because that's literally what that is.
It's different mechanics for teaching you to. You can't change the rules to teach you the rules.
Right.
It doesn't work like that.
No. And I think the biggest clarification for those who don't know what we're talking about, so Star Wars Destiny card and dice game where you basically have a deck of 30 cards. And in the starter decks for Star Wars Destiny, every single starter deck is only 20 cards. Which is not how you should be playing the game. And the way that the starter decks are built are kind of wonky. The last set is not bad. But they're not great. But the rules, though, are fantastic. They will get you to walk through and experience everything. It's just it's like what we talked about, where they're putting you in a place where you're playing the game, but you're not actually playing the game, if that makes sense. It's the best way to describe it.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. Why? Why would you do this to me? This blasphemy. Anything else, Will?
They're important.
Anything else, Will?
Dang important. Sonic. Sometimes you have a great tutorial. Sometimes you're Sonic Unleashed.
Oh, so you know what? That's got to be an episode of the podcast for you and I have a discussion about Sonic Unleashed. I got to replay that.
I feel like I got to do some explaining about my Sonic 06 statement.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say. I think we just need to have a whole podcast dedicated to Sonic. That's something we'll have to plan out in the future.
I would love to.
But honestly, like that's what's so weird about the Sonic games is that like some of them have really awesome tutorials,
so good, and
then others are just trash.
Yeah, like they just flip flop. It's like, but it's so good.
It's like I love Sonic Heroes, but man, the tutorials in that game are awful.
Oh my goodness, no,
they're not good. Not good at all.
No, not at all.
They're not. No. Great game still. Just the tutorial system. It does throw you for a loop a little bit if you played other Sonic games up to that point. But hey, what can you do? I'm not a game developer, but I am a game connoisseur. I like to eat my games medium rare.
I've developed my fair share of games, and want to know what I did for a tutorial? Let you learn from the gameplay.
It's like the whole theme of this entire podcast is like whenever, like honestly, this goes from any type of teaching too, because this isn't just from the game side. Like doing something practical to learn whatever you're learning is like the best way to absorb that information. Like,
yeah.
It really is.
The second you learn it yourself, the second it's gonna stick.
Exactly. Like
get something shoved down your throat, 8 times, and you'll never know. But the second you're like, oh, okay, I can use this to beat that guy with the shield. Bam, you know it forever.
Exactly. Like actually practically doing it.
Every time you see the shield guy, you're like, okay, let me get ready to be dodging all over the place. Like, you figure it out yourself. You know it.
Practical knowledge, people.
Yes.
Teachers and game developers alike. Make people do the things that you're trying to teach them. Don't make them try to memorize stuff. That's not how this works.
Memorization is not helpful.
No, it doesn't work. Trust me. Been there, done that. Doesn't work. But
no, because I'm concerned.
I think, Will, that is all the time that we have for the show. So I just want to say, first off, thank you for coming on. This was a great second episode.
My pleasure. Yeah.
It was a great topic. I think next time that I have you on the show, I will need to have replayed Sonic Unleashed, and we will have to debate our Sonic Unleashed statements.
Okay. I'm
down with this.
Not on the Wii.
Yeah, no, yeah, we're definitely playing the real version of the game.
Yeah.
Not the Wii version. But Will Smith, before we go, is there anything that you would like to plug or shout out or anything? before we go?
You can follow me on Twitter if you want, I guess. I post drawings every once in a while. I've been liked by the West of Loathing guys.
So you know what's up.
For my original West of Loathing artwork.
You know what's up then. You're getting liked by popular people.
Yeah. I did get liked by popular people. That's at Smithy William.
And Smithy William at Twitter.
Yeah. SMIFFYWILLIM Smithy William.
When Smithy is not doing his rap albums.
Weirdo, yeah. Will Smith was like taken by some like who even knows who that guy is?
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know who that guy is.
Just happened to get it first. Yeah, it was weird.
Got some impersonators, man. I don't like it.
Crazy. I gotta go figure that.
Yeah, you gotta go figure that out. I mean, like you gotta go see who this other Will Smith guy is. You know?
Yeah.
I don't understand what he's like getting so popular about and everything. I don't get it.
Like it's weird.
But
I think he's trying to be like he's really
I know,
really
I don't like it. I don't like it. I think only you have a talk with him.
Yeah.
Only have a talk.
Yeah, you know what? I think I may have to send him an email or something.
Yeah, I think that's what we need to do. Like everyone go.
Everyone go.
Don't actually don't do that.
Don't
actually do that. I don't want to start something Will Smith, and then somehow we get the real Will Smith on the podcast. He's like, "All right, so we have a conversation about how I got a bunch of angry emails from you," and I'm like, "That's a great way to start this conversation with a celebrity."
Have a conversation with Will Smith.
That would be dope, though. Wouldn't that be so cool to have Will Smith on a podcast
and just
talk with him?
I would love that.
Oh my god. But anyway, you know, it's not a Luke Jones podcast when we're ending on some weird conversational note. It's just how we have to operate.
Of course. If you're interested in game design and level stuff, I know several YouTube videos that are very informative on.
Are you plugging them?
When this topic is up, so if anyone's interested in like to know,
okay,
I'll send those.
Well, I guess we'll go ahead and close out the show. Thank you once again, Will Smith, for joining me on the second episode of Brought to the Table. And until then, everybody, I hope you come back and listen to our third episode when it goes live. And until then, I hope you enjoy the next idea that gets brought to the table. I will see you then.